Okay, we'll be starting now. Um, a very good evening to all attendees who have joined us today. I am Shreya Yadav, Lead Campus Ambassador, Public Concern for Governance Trust, and President, PCGT National Youth Parliament. I'd like to welcome you all to this public lecture on unity and diversity, lessons from history, and the way forward. Public Concern for Governance Trust is a registered trust founded by Mr. Julio Ribeiro, Dr. R.K. Anand, and late Mr. B.G. Deshmukh to increase public participation and activism towards creating a more transparent and efficient governance system. PCGT works towards good governance, containing corruption and upholding and inculcating values and enhancing the feeling of Sadbhavna in the citizens. In furtherance to this vision, PCGT started the Youth for Governance program in 2012, the Campus Ambassador program in 2019, and the Lead Campus Ambassador program in 2020. The Kuch Aur program is centered at instilling moral values in school children. PCGT has also done tremendous work to sensitize the citizens regarding the Right to Information Act through various seminars and workshops. PCGT Conclave 2021 is being conducted in association with Pravin Gandhi College of Law. Shri Parle Kelvani Mandal is a public charitable trust registered under the Societies Registration Act 1860 and the Bombay Public Trusts Act 1950. SVKM has always been committed to the cause of providing high quality education at various levels. The SVKM's Pravin Gandhi College of Law (PGCL) was established in the year 2004 and is affiliated to the University of Mumbai. PGCL aims at giving students exposure to experiential learning in the varied fields of law, and in this regard, they have organized and conducted various workshops and seminars. Unity and diversity has been a hallmark feature of the Indian society and culture since ages. However, with rising instances of communal hatred, it is essential for the youth to understand, evaluate, and implement this feature in their day-to-day life. We at PCGT strive to promote Sadbhavna in citizens and ethical values amongst the youth. In furtherance to this vision, PCGT's lead campus ambassadors have organized the maiden edition of the PCGT Conclave, which will host attendees from various age groups through a variety of events like the Oxford debate, paper presentations, dialogues, public lectures, etc., on the various aspects of unity and diversity, ranging from lessons from the past to its relevance in the current times. Now, I would like to introduce Chairman Public Concern for Governance Trust, Mr. V.P. Raja. Mr. V.P. Raja, after obtaining 2 postgraduate degrees in physics from Delhi University and Columbia University, joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1974. While in service, he completed an MA in Rural Development Planning from the University of East Anglia. He further obtained an MPhil degree in Social Sciences from the Indian Institute of Public Administration, New Delhi. As an IAS officer of the Maharashtra cadre, he has worked in various assignments at the district, state, and center. In recognition of his outstanding contributions to administrative reforms, while working as collector of Satara and as Transport Commissioner Maharashtra, Mr. Raja was awarded the Distinguished Government Administration Award. With the Government of India, he worked at the Ministry of Human Resource Development, the Planning Commission, the Ministry of Defense, and at the Department of Atomic Energy. He retired as the principal advisor to the Department of Atomic Energy in September 2008. Thereafter, he was the chairman of the Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission (MERC) for a period of 5 years till he attained the age of 65. Concurrently, Raja Sir was also the chairman of the Expert Appraisal Committee of the Ministry of Environment and Forests of the Government of India for appraising of new projects for coal mining and thermal power projects from the point of view of their environmental impacts. Mr. Raja continues to be actively involved in various issues of the energy sector. He has a passion for teaching, coaching, and mentoring young students. He is a visiting faculty at the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, University of Mumbai, and at the BSc Institute. He teaches courses centered on statistics, business research, and quantitative methods in economics. I would now request Chairman of Public Concern for Governance Trust, Mr. V.P. Raja, to please deliver the welcome address for today.
You can hear me? I hope I have successfully unmuted. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Shreya. We are very happy to have Mr. Jawhar Sircar with us today. And it's my pleasure to welcome him. Mr. Jawhar Sircar is a retired IAS officer of the West Bengal cadre. He was the former CEO of Prasar Bharati from February 2012 to October 2016. And that was a time when he brought about a lot of changes, technological changes in Doordarshan and in public broadcasting. As CEO of Prasar Bharati, he introduced digital technologies, cut down obsolescence, received a number of awards. During that time, he was also elected as the vice president of the world's largest public TV and radio broadcasting organization, the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, of which 67 nations, in which 67 nations are represented. Earlier to his work as CEO of Prasar Bharati, he was secretary in the Ministry of Culture in the Government of India from 2008 to 2012. And he is perhaps one of the persons in India who knows maximum about culture and has done a lot of work on every aspect of culture, including all museums. He has been a member of the Governing Council of the Indian Council of World Affairs, Consortium of Educational Communication, Film and TV Institute of India. He was a trustee member of IIM Calcutta, Victoria Memorial Museum in Calcutta, the Indian Museum, National Museum, National Library, National School of Drama, and the three famous national academies. Mr. Sircar is also the vice president, was the vice president of the All India Tennis Association. He was the president of the Children's Little Theatre, a trustee member of Public Service Broadcasting Trust. In terms of educational background, he studied at St. Xavier's School in Calcutta, the most famous college which everybody knows in Calcutta, the Presidency College in Calcutta University. And thereafter, he has degrees from both from Cambridge University and from the University of Sussex. He has 2 master's degrees, one in history and one in sociology. But besides these academic credentials and the outstanding work that he has done in service, he's a keen blogger. He writes regularly in newspapers, both in English and in Bengali. And I, for one, the moment I see an article from him, I make it a point to read it because much like Mr. Ribeiro, who also writes regularly, Mr. Jawhar Sircar is one of the persons writing regularly. Along with me and Mr. Ribeiro, he is also a member of our Constitutional Contact Group. And very recently, he organized a press conference as a subcommittee of the Constitutional Contact Group is working on a lot of issues pertaining to elections in India. And the first report of that group came out, and Mr. Sircar kind of took all the initiative to hold a very well-attended press conference to explain the recommendations. Perhaps on some other occasion, we will invite him to explain that aspect. So in short, a very, very multifaceted personality. And I should not encroach into his time anymore. So Shreya, can we request him directly now to deliver his lecture? I think so. Yes, Mr. Sircar.
Yes.
Good evening, and thank you to the PCGT for inviting me. What you see behind me is the visual capture just outside my window, and it represents unity in diversity in more senses than one. It's a garden just outside. It's a garden made out of just an urban wall outside my window. Now, I'm so glad to be able to address the young generation today on a topic on which we all need to be very serious. We have heard of this term unity in diversity as a phrase that has been popular. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have all been conscious of the term unity and diversity that has been popularized by Pandit Nehru, our first Prime Minister. But today we need to get into the soul of the phrase. To understand what modern India stands for or what modern India is by way of an achievement, not as a product, we have to see it from the perspective of what Churchill had said at the time of India's independence. He had predicted rather gleefully that India would disintegrate. It is not physically possible for such a complex nation to hold together. Apart from a touch of malice, he was being realistic also. So let us look at the picture of India at the time of independence and just before partition. India consisted of 14 separate large British Indian provinces and 565 kingdoms. Yes, they were kingdoms. They were known in Indian parlance as princely states. They were all independent. Most of them had their own coinage. They had their own Raja, Maharaja, Nawab. They had their own armies, and they were pretty much independent. India had to start from this checkered slate, and to refresh our minds, we can go back to certain statements made by British scholars. For instance, John Strachey had mentioned in 1870s that India never existed. It is not ever, and he repeated, never was any India. There was no Indian nation. There was no people of India. A few years later, Seeley clarified this by saying India is only a geographical entity. It's like Asia, Europe, and Africa. It's a geographical entity. It does not make the terms of a nation. It has no language of its own. He was right. We had right now 24 major languages and 1,600 dialects. 1,600 dialects and 6 active religions. And if you want to go into further details, we have 6,400 castes. The idea of India supersedes it all. The idea of India was again popularized by my friend Mr. Sunil Khilnani, but it was taken from the idea of Iran by a Persian scholar. We have to compare this complexity of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious India with other examples to get the point. Let us look at 2 different sets of multi-religious, multi-linguistic, multi-ethnic sets of nations. China started off as a separate entity of its own. I won't use the word nation because the term nation with all its definition comes only in the 20th century in reality. Universally, I mean. China started as an empire under an emperor called Qin Shi Huangdu. And he issued his proclamation just 10 years after the Battle of Kalinga. And this Qin Sheng Huangdu, after whom the Chinese nation is named, after whom he named a lot of things after him, Qin, homogenized the people of the Middle Kingdom to an exceedingly, to an incredible limit. He decided what would be this length of the axle of bullock carts. That was the degree of homogenization. It was one coinage, one language, one religion, one philosophy. And philosophers contrary to it were burnt, simply burnt alive. I am raising this point dramatically because it was in the same decade that we had an emperor in India called Ashoka. Ashoka also united India. Ashoka had also indulged in bloodshed, but in the very same decade that we are talking about, in the 250 BC or thereabouts, this is the time when Ashoka also went about declaring his intention through his messaging system. His messaging system was, of course, not WhatsApp or SMS at that time. It consisted of more corporal rocks, huge rocks on which his edicts were inscribed. And here was Ashoka giving a message that was completely contrary to what Emperor Qin Sheng Huangdi had given. He was talking to people in different languages. He was aware of the diversity of India. He was mentioning tolerance and nonviolence as the essence of state policy. Can you see the root difference from which we started? Now let us get back to China. China's policy that began in the 3rd century BC continued relentlessly to homogenize. One nation, one people, one language, and if you are different, too bad for you. Too bad for you. That is what's happening in Xinjiang or with the Uyghurs, with the Tibetans, with the captive Koreans, with Mongolians. Every minority is simply smothered out. There is no scope for dissent. The second country with which you compare, obviously, is India, but we will come to greater details later. The second country worth comparing with India and China is Russia. Russia found its national identity in the 15th century, its empire in the 16th, and after that has followed a policy of thorough and utter relentless Russification. Again, the same thing, one policy, one religion, one everything. And this policy is enforced by the sword. We all know it. Even during the period of the Soviet Union, the other republics were forcefully Russified. In other words, Russian culture was thrust on them. The other large mega multinational state that we can talk about is the United States. United States also is home to dozens of languages, dozens of ethnicities. But if you notice, the United States has one language. It prefers one religion, Anglo-Saxon Protestant. It was quite a shock for Americans when the first Catholic was seeking election as president, and that was Robert Kennedy. The first Black got in as president a few years ago. So it was white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and it doesn't matter whether your name is Samar or whether your name is whatever, Jai Kishan, you become Jackson. You have to waspize yourself and adopt one language, perhaps with the same twang. I'm mentioning these cases of homogenization to contrast the reality of India. This reality of the plurality of India is, of course, under severe threat today. Anyone who minimizes it is not being realistic. We are not political when we say that this homogeneity, this efflorescence of different languages, different cultures, different ethnicities is under real threat. But let us move on to a few examples of what I call operational diversity and operational unity, how the system worked in history. The examples that I'll be taking are, okay, we'll start with a secular example, so to say, in the beginning. We can start with the New Year being celebrated in India. First of all, we don't have one New Year. Let's be clear. And if you have heard, I'm referring to the students, if you have heard from your parents that our New Year is on that day or this day, we have to clarify that there are two standard New Years in India to begin with. And what are the two New Years? One is what we call the Chaitra Shukla Pratipat. It's in Chaitra, that's normally in the month of March. This year it's spilled on to April. It follows the lunar calendar and therefore the date shifts. It's what we call popularly known as the Ugadi. Ugadi or Yugadi. It is known in Maharashtra as the Gudi Padwa. It is known under different names, but this is the first New Year that is celebrated by a large section of Indians, mainly in the Deccan, both Western and Upper Central Deccan. We have another New Year, the number of which the people who celebrate or the regions that celebrate this New Year is a little more. This Baisakhi. Baisakhi follows a solar calendar, and Baisakhi, the very term itself is from North India, Punjab. It's called Poila Boishakh in Bengal. It's called Goru Bihu by the Assamese. In Odisha, it's known as Vishu Sankranti. In Kerala, it's Vishu, and Tamil Nadu, it goes on. And if I'm aside from my state, Bengal, and they're joining sister state, as we call it, Bangladesh, both Hindus and Muslims celebrate it. Muslims celebrate it with far more gaiety than we do. Now, the point that I'm making is, each of these names that I mentioned to you, whether it be Godu Bihu, whether it be just Vaisakhi, whether it be Gudi Padwa, each one has its own rituals. Each one has its own mandates. They have their own, like in Gudi Padwa, as you know, in Maharashtra, they stick a pot on top of a pole and have a banner. And there are a lot of festivities that go around this, the copper pot, the shining pot. This is very peculiar. This is very typical of Maharashtra, but is not seen anywhere else. Now, imagine if we permitted a homogenizer to come in and say it has to be one festival on one day. First of all, these festivities emanated as standalone independent ones. Remember, they celebrated that date on the basis of their own calculations and customs over hundreds of years. They were subjected to Brahmanical influences. They were Sanskritized. But the fact remains that despite Sanskritization, they retain their own color. For instance, in Kerala and Tamil Nadu, the viewing of the Kanni, the Kanni, my pronunciation is lousy. The first view, auspicious view on the morning of the New Year is something that they pine for. This custom doesn't exist anywhere else. It's a custom that originated in deep Dravida land and was furthered, and it survived itself into the structure of Hinduism. It was not antithetical to anyone, antithetical to any doctrine. It was retained and Hinduized or Sanskritized. The point is that individual customs are a product of the soil, and there is no standard Indian rule. I often hear of something called regional variations. I beg to ask the question, variation of what? Where is the national standard that we are all varying? The variations exist on their own strength. They are varied because they differ from each other. But we do not have a national standard. And we are a nation because we don't have a national standard. We are one because we are many. Remember that. We are one because we are many. We have flowered in our own ways in different directions, in different cultures, or all the cultures have unanimously got together to blend into a nation called India, into a culture and a civilization called Indian, and happily so. But any interference in this, if someone comes up with a command and says that we shall not have copper pots, we shall not have Gudi Padwa, we shall not have Poila Boishakh, we shall not have Pongal, it is sacrilegious to the very idea of India. We celebrate because we have had crops the day before, the month before. We celebrate for very different reasons. And the diversity of the geography and the ecosystems, the agroclimatic zones lend themselves to variation. Any imagination otherwise is not only misleading, it is dangerous to the very existence of one of the world's most successful experiments in multilingual, multicultural existence. When I emphasize on multilingual, you all know we follow at least the 2-language policy, if not 3 languages. When we meet, we speak in the common language, English or Hindi usually. The moment we depart from this group, we go back to our own languages, Marathi or Telugu or whatever. We navigate between languages, we navigate between foods so effortlessly, isn't it? And we mean to keep it this way because the comfort in my soul rests on my ability to speak my way, to have my own food, and yet to be together with everyone else. That is it. Now, let me give you some other examples of how this diversity has worked in the context of India, the historical part. Let us take one more festival that is common all over India, Makar Sankranti. Makar Sankranti is really on the 14th of January. It follows the solar calendar because it's determined by the movement of the sun. The sun moves northwards, it's known as Uttarayan. And in different states, in different regions, they have different names. In Punjab, the festival is known as Lohri. And they burn a lot of firewood, they celebrate with a lot of dancing. In Jammu, it's known as Lohri. In Karnataka, it will be Makara Sankramana. In Kashmir, it's known as Sahin Krat. In Tamil Nadu, it is Pongal. In Gujarat, it is Uttarayan. In Bihar, Jharkhand, and large parts of UP, it's known as Khichdi Padwa. In Bengal, it is known as Makar Sankranti. And if you want to hear the exact Bengali word, it's Makar Sankranti. They put O's everywhere, as you know. So Makar Sankranti. And this is the way the same festival goes around all of India. Again, as I said, there is no all India standard that needs to be imposed on others. Each of the names that I mentioned to you imply a separate origin of a culture. The burning of logs in, let us say, Punjab, is not followed to that degree in Bengal or Assam or Odisha. We don't have that amount of logs to burn on that day. And the food that is offered in every place, in Tamil Nadu, for instance, the new rice is boiled with milk and sugar, and as it comes out boiling, they clap in glee, Pongala Ponga. But that would be very strange to a person from UP, who's simply not understanding that why are they allowing the milk to boil over. You don't need to get into the under the skin to understand that each one has his own sentiment. Each of these festivities, each of these functions have originated from their own cultures. They satisfy the requirements of that people. And as long as they are together, as long as they are situated in the Republic of India, as long as they are in the Indian subcontinent, they will beg to be their own. Beg to be their own does not mean that they are violating some mythical national or patriotic principle. That is a new doctrine that started. I would not like to get caught in that. But the fact is, if you touch your heart and look at your state, your culture, and say, would I like somebody else to make it different? Unity in diversity has been practiced in India for decades and centuries. If I get into some of the festivities, some of the rituals, I mentioned to you about Tamil Nadu. They come to think of it, why is it that Makar Sankranti in many states is celebrated around til, gingerly, sesame, and sugarcane? Have you ever wondered? All over North India and many parts of India, they offer you sweets made out of til and good jaggery or something. It's a simple celebration. Remember, a kitchen needs 4 items to run. Every kitchen everywhere in the world requires 4 items to run. One is salt. India has sufficient amount of salt. India never had problems with salt. It was the British who had problems with our salt, and we needed to make our presence felt at Dundee, saying it's our salt, we pay you no taxes. Salt. And then we need sugar, something to sweeten. We need a cooking medium, and we need spices. It is our spices for which the Europeans came, scrambled over each other, killed themselves, killed us in the process, and got our spices out. Because without spices, you can't garnish, you can't flavor, you can't preserve. The reason I'm mentioning all this is that each of them has a history of bloodshed behind them. Salt, for instance, was a very rare commodity in Europe, and the Europeans had to come fighting their way into the Middle East to get salt, which is one of the reasons why they picked up lumps of salt and a custom from the Middle East before Islam. Pre-Islamic Arabs, they picked it up and started transacting in lumps of salt that was used as currency, as monthly payments to soldiers, where we get the word salarium, standing for salt. It means our monthly salary, but the actual meaning of the word is salt. As you know, those of us who have been influenced by Arab culture, we also use the term namak khaya, namak haram, namak halal, so it's based on it. Now, moving on from salt and spices that India had in abundant quantities, we come to 2 items that India also had, but was subject to crops. One was the annual supply of oil that came from til, the sesame seed. The other was the annual supply of sugar that came from sugarcane. In the ancient period, both of them, or the major crops, were in around this time in deep winter. Cropping patterns have changed, hybridization has happened, agronomic practices have changed, but the ancient system was these crops would come out in the month of Pause or December or early January. And the celebration, therefore, was basically, brother, we have got our supply of oil, which means we have got our sesame, we have got our til, and we can have our infinite supply of oil for this year. And we have also sugar and sugarcane, sugar lumps of jaggery. So this sweets made out of jaggery and til, incidentally, word tila is the root word for the Indian word, for the Sanskrit word for oil, which is tailam. Tela comes from the root word is tila. That is sesame, the indigenous oil. After that, we've all got groundnut oil and so many other oils. But the original oil is tila. Now, I'm mentioning this because the entire festival all over India has a magical band. But we don't emphasize on that band. We emphasize on our interpretation, our foods, our dances, our songs, our way of celebrating, and basically our community getting together around it. So while we have an all India necessity largely at work behind the scenes, we have never imposed that everyone in India shall have to have til and jaggery on that very day. If that was there, if I know the Indian character of autonomy, there would be large-scale revolts. See, the beauty of the whole thing would be destroyed by bullying or imposition. In Punjab, UP, Haryana, Bihar, they make a khichdi out of rice, dal, and seasonable vegetables all put together. They celebrate with milk and jaggery. A custom that is common, more or less, on this day is Ganga Snan, bathing in that cold water to make you pure. I mean, I'm not sure whether it was very popular with everyone, but well, it mandated in the middle of January, go and have a nice bath. And even cattle were taken without taking their referendum as to whether they like to get into the cold water on that day. And then, as you know, among the regional variations, we have bullock cart races in Tamil Nadu and many parts of South India. We have that very dangerous bull taming contest, Jallikattu. So, Jallikattu, for instance, would be completely strange to Bengal and Odisha, and the sight of those bulls would drive them away. So, the beauty of India lies in the fact of its regional splendor. And unity and diversity has been practiced in this manner throughout history. I can take up two more examples just to get the point across, but both of these will be from Hindu religion, or as I would say, Indic religions. The religion was sprouted organically from the soil of India and flourished through religions, through variations, through platforms like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and others, Indic religion. One is, for instance, Diwali. Now let's have a look at this Diwali to understand how close we are and how different we are. Diwali is celebrated as a festival of lights all over India. Fair enough. Sorry, you're wrong. Diwali is a celebration of the festival of darkness in Eastern India. Nights have come in, the diyas have come in, but that's all under the influence of modern Indian civilization. But the original festival of the Bengalis and adjoining Assamese, the parts of Maithil in Bihar, parts of Odisha, is celebrating Amavasya. That is the darkest night of the year, was celebrated as the worship of the darkest god on the pantheon, Kali. Kali, the word Kala means black. So you see the variation, that Kali was worshipped and is worshipped pretty strongly, even in Bengal, even now, during Diwali. And this part of Eastern India begs to differ. As I said, now lights and candles and everything have come in, but the basic celebration relates to darkness and the goddess of darkness. The rest of India well, there's nothing called the rest of India. The northern part of India celebrates their own, celebrates Lakshmi and celebrates Rama. Ram's return to Ayodhya is celebrated as the reason for Diwali. Come out of North India, nobody has heard of Ram coming back, or nobody celebrates it because Ram went back to Ayodhya. In South India, it's basically Deepavali, the celebration of the oil lamps, the lamps. That's all. It is a celebration of Lakshmi. It's a celebration. Now, homogenization does take place. A good example is crackers. Crackers come into, fireworks and crackers come in and make a cultural intervention only when the Explosives Act was amended, I think in 1943 or so, and a very enterprising fellow from Sivakasi got the idea of making crackers. So crackers were popularized around 1945-50, and it spread like wildfire. Because crackers and wildfire don't get along well, but that's the only term I can use. So every culture that celebrates Diwali has also adopted crackers. But there, this is an invention of tradition. So you see, these separate celebrations are not opposed to new ideas, opposed to more binding cultural expressions. And now all these crackers will be banned, are on the process of being banned by the environmental law. So all of us will also take it into consideration that this was a phase that we all burned crackers, we all celebrated by exploding chocolate bombs and whatever you had between 45 and maybe 2021, 2020, and that's the end of the story. This is an intervention I'm giving you, an all-India intervention that had nothing to do with the separate celebrations of Diwali. Now, Diwali is known as Bhoot Chaturdashi. Many of you may not even have heard the term. Bhoot means ghost, Chaturdashi means the 14th day of the ghost. And it is celebrated even in those states, Bhoot Chaturdashi, the worship of dark spirits is worshipped on that day, even in states that actually celebrate light. So you get the degree of the adjustment of different contradictory elements. Indic religion has been the practice of the management of contradictions. It is a management of contradictions that has reigned supreme, that has got all of us together, from the Khandekar to Barwa to Subramaniam to Chatterjee to Chawla, Chopra's and Chaddas. We have all come together. We all cheer the same team. We all feel proud under the tricolor flag because we were all allowed to remain different. The difference, this is the day, Diwali is also the day in which it is known as the period. Diwali is the 4-day celebration in North India. In the East, it is 1 day. In the South, it is usually 1 day. So the North gets its own chance to play around with their celebrations. There is Bali Pratipad celebrated, Bhai Dooj, that is the festival where sisters pray to the god for the welfare of their brothers. Bhratri Ditya, it's known under different names. Bhai Dooj, that is, Bhai Dooj is celebrated in many parts of India. But the South was not ever known to be celebrating Bhai Dooj. It may have started taking up now, but then this is how we allow cultures to impact each other in their own easy, organic ways. The simple point is, when you have so many beautiful flowers like the one behind me, they all look good because they are all different. If they are all pink or all white, it would be a rather dull sight. Now, under this festival, as I said, there are other elements that come in, the worship of Krishna, the worship of other gods, they come in. And the reason for mentioning it is just look at this festival. It's an Indic festival, or if you want to call it Hindu, it's a Hindu festival. There's a festival, fair enough. But more than the religiosity is a celebratory, isn't it? The celebratory element. People are waiting for the moment when good food comes in, good music comes in, good dance comes in, good stuff comes in. Of course, God also does matter, but then I'm not making you atheist. The last festival that I'll take up as a historical past, and I'll mention to you why I'm using religion as history, is Navaratri. Now you say, oh, Navaratri, we all celebrate it. It's a uniform all India festival. Hold on. What is Navaratri? Is a celebration of 9 nights of the goddess. Okay. In North India, the culmination is Ram's victory over Ravan at Dashera. Okay. And 9 nights are supposed to be maintained with a certain degree of austerity, pure vegetarian food, even for those who are non-vegetarians, abstinence from certain foods, rituals, vratas or obligations, and goes on. Well, that's for North India and large parts of South India. Where the East is concerned, it just couldn't care less. It's a celebration of Mother Durga, and they bring out the best of mutton, the best of fish, and they celebrate with the best of non-vegetarian food. So does the East become seditious? It has its own festivals, and the East celebrates it because these festivals have sprung up very naturally from the soil of the East. It is a combination of worships that the tribals made in the past, that zamindars made in the past, that people wanted, and therefore it is arisen. We don't need either to gloat or to apologize. That is the spirit of India. These are all natural. These go through their own cycles. That there's a beautiful system in Tamil Nadu and other places known as Bombay Kolu. Bombay Kolu, where dolls are arranged in a beautiful, in a very attractive manner. When I saw it, I just couldn't connect it with the festival. But then Navaratri has its own charms, its own celebrations. It is known by different names. It is known as Ghata Sthapana Utsav. Ghata Sthapana Utsav in Maharashtra and other parts, where Ghata pot is put on clay, and another pot is filled with water and 7 different types of seed, and the seeds are allowed to sprout. Now, with common sense, we know that it is a fertility rites. It celebrates, it worships, it holds up the fertility of the soil, the fertility of crops, the fertility of products. In fact, the Ghata itself, all over India, in spite of differences among the Indic religions, Ghat or the pitcher usually stands for the womb and fertility. So Ghata Sthapana also comes from that origin and has been refined. In fact, when we mention womb, you know, the great dance of Gujarat, Garba, also originates from the same word, Garba, that is the womb. And Dandiya Ras was added to it. So please see, the same pot becomes a copper pot in Goa. In Bengal, this aspect comes in during Durga Puja in a different way. Bengal does not celebrate 9 nights, incidentally. Oh, it's too much for them. They celebrate the last 3. Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, and of course Dashera, 4 days if you want. But they then extend it for almost 2 weeks if they can, because working is not a very high priority here. So social cohesion through festivities a higher priority. So during the Navaratri or Durga Puja, as the East would like to call it, During this period, on the Saptami day, fertility worship comes in when a small sapling of the banana tree is taken into knee-deep water, washed and bathed and dressed in a sari and put along, tie, and the leaves of many other ritual plants are put together and tied with it. And few people hardly notice. Next time you go to a Bengali Durga Puja Pandal, when you look at Durga and Lakshmi and that Asur and the fights that are going on, keep your eyes straight and you will notice this little plant draped in a sari in front. That is a concession that they made to this demand for worshipping fertility during Navaratri. This is how Indic religions have come up. This is how they have sprung up organically, and this is how they have maintained the difference. The question that can be asked is, why did I pick up religion? Ladies and gentlemen, you must understand that before the arrival of the legislature, which happened at different points of time in different countries, the only legislating body available was religion. If religion says it is an offense, it became a sin. Religion's IPC was sin. The penal code of religion was sin. The punishment was suffering, either in this life or it's carried forward through an opening balance, through carry forward accounting into your next life. And that declaration of an act as sin, the declaration of an act as piety, this is pious. You gain brownie points before God or before your religion. These were the punishments and rewards that law gave. The law that preceded the arrival of modern legislated law. For millennia before the arrival of legislated law, we had this legislation called religion. It was upsided, it was this and that. We can get into all these arguments, but remember, it was religion and diktats, fair or unfair, put together that held human society in some sort of discipline. It is again the mandates of religion and semi-religious customs by which we decided our food, our rituals, our preferences. Some would like tamarind imli on that one day, some would like another food on the other day. And this is how we have held together. I picked up on religion, though I'm not deeply religious myself. I picked up on religion because factually, recorded political history will not explain these diversities in such detail. Unity and culture, unity and diversity are first a matter of the heart, perception, and culture. Then they become political. Both, incidentally, are absolutely essential to the survival of India. When you have literally hundreds and thousands of differing groups coming and staying next to each other, have you ever heard of a people who have left India and migrated? I mean, I'm not talking of NRIs. In ancient times, this is the only land into which people came in and settled, never left. This is the only land from which we never led an invasion out. This is a land of accommodation. This is a happy equilibrium. We have arrived at an equilibrium without the aid of a centralized state power. A centralized state power, whenever we had the Mauryas or the Guptas or the Mughals, were basically revenue collecting agencies, basically law and order agencies. They didn't enter into our private domain. To maintain our relations between different ethnic groups, different linguistic groups, between different religious groups, we adopted each other's customs. I can give you a lot of examples of where customs were adopted from Islam and put in, customs were given to Islam, and Indian Islam, which incidentally is different from, let us say, Arab Islam or other Islam, Indian Christianity, which is substantially different from, let us say, the Eastern Orthodox Church or from the Roman Catholic. strict the Roman Catholic version or the Protestant version. We have adopted because we have commingled, we have taken the best out of each and have given the best to each. This coexistence, this respect for variety, we must admit, was also a necessity as much as a virtue. Without this tolerance, without this love for each other, I won't use the word love, at least the tolerance for each other's diversity, we would not survive as a nation. India is today an impossible experiment that has succeeded. No one can really look at one more example in the world where without homogenization, without imposition of one language like Russia, China, or America, we flourish. We allow the dominance of language to come up organically, naturally, beautifully. If we are conversing in Hindi, it's because we have chosen to converse in it. If we are conversing in English, it is because we have chosen and we find it convenient. The act of convenience is also inscribed as a virtue of group living. We have not only a necessity, not only a virtue out of it, we have a deep necessity. And this necessity has been worshipped in India as unity despite diversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And with your permission, we would like to take a few questions from the participants. So the first question is by Professor Kavita Sharma. She asks, in the fast-paced life, the young generation is swayed away with the idea of what makes them happy, and they think that the rituals and customs which we are following are too old to follow. What would be your message to the youth in this respect to follow the cultures and traditions of our country?
You see, there has not been a single generation of young men and women who have not thought in that manner. We also considered our elders to be quite backward, quite backdated, and these rituals to be highly religious, rituals to be highly imposing, and so on. We have all considered, and my father's generation has also considered it this way. At the introduction stage, these are very natural thoughts, and I'm glad that the young think that way. As we proceed in life and we look for the comfort of existence in this highly competitive world, we come back to the lap of our mother, our culture. We may go on having Western food in New York, but if somebody gives me, somebody gives a Malayali food somewhere in New York, he'll drop all the best of Western food and rush for his mother's lap. Culture, food, culture, rituals, these offer you the comfort of the mother's lap. And the older you get, the sooner the more you realize they are also essential binders to your identity and to your sanity. Even if you disown your own culture or religion, people all around will consider you to be a member of that group. So you can't disown it and say, I'm a Banerjee, but I'm not a Bengali. I don't believe in that thing. They will keep telling you that you're a Banerjee, you're supposed to know a bit of it. It's a matter of only essentiality that you do know a bit of it. You may not like it. Your personal, we are not asking you to come and vote with an EVM machine. We are asking you to accept its existence and absorb it to the degree you want your way. Believe me, the older and the older you grow, the more you go to different places, the more you realize how you pine for those rituals, how you pine for those rituals. Remember this.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next question is from Rushali. She asks, Sir, you have beautifully brought forward the diversity of our country, its rich culture and knowledge. But my apprehension is that young generation is losing the connection with it and being largely influenced by the Western lifestyle. How can we generate curiosity in youngsters today to acquaint them with this rich culture and knowledge?
Well, it has to come naturally, or it will never come. It has to come naturally. The family has a duty in it. Many nuclear families prepare the single child as a very successful dollar earner. That is their issue. If they lose the dollar child, they can't creep back and say, oh, we went off to America and forgot all of us. It is for the family, that is the nuclear, that is the cradle of all culture, to come up. I'm never saying to impose religious rituals. I have found it quite difficult to accept. Say, come and put this tika, come and do this and all that. I mean, now that I'm almost 70, I can tell you that I don't think I've ever fasted. My mother would come and say, oh, you look so dry, you're fasting all day. She had no idea that I had never had this concept of fasting. Nonsense. Why should I fast? I had my stuff and then went and did my prayers. And I guess God also knew that this guy standing and praying is a little more difficult. So it happens.
Thank you, sir.
It has.
Thank you,
Yes.
sir. The next question is from Shri. She asks, in this world where individuals are categorized, rather discriminated on the basis of the ideology that they support, how do we ensure intercultural integrity while striving to preserve individual culture? Did you face any such challenges during your career? And could you please guide us through your experience in this regard?
You see, just like we look inward for comfort, it is only natural to look outward for discomfort. In other words, somebody who's not like you and stays next to you gets your attention as somebody separate, somebody distinct, somebody who doesn't celebrate your celebration, somebody who doesn't eat your food, somebody who eats something different, behaves in a different manner. But then without that differing opinion and differing lifestyle, you'd be devastatingly dull. That's my first thing. Second is, by getting along with others, you learn the art of survival. And more than that, the world is composed of so many diverse groups, so much diversity that you have to go beyond the parochialism of what you were taught and what you were told to what you discover and what you accept. It is an individual choice shaped by the culture, shaped by the value system of the culture you were brought up in, the family you were brought up in, the school you were brought up in. So they contribute. And sometimes they're a bit of a disadvantage. But you as a thinking human being, you as an evolved human, you have to come to your own choices. Globalization is not bad at all, let me tell you. If somebody adopts a lot of Western music and a Western style, let him or her do it if she's enjoying it. But at the end, there'll come a time when she or he will pine for Amma's dish. That I can assure you. I have done a bit of rebellion also. And I can tell you that there's nothing like that dish, nothing like that music that was played during that festival. And these are what holds us together to our culture. And culture, in one word, is like the anchor that's dropped in and firmly entrenches us with sanity. It's an accident which culture you were born into, which religion you were born into. Nobody took a census. Nobody took my vote or opinion when I was being born. Would I like to be born into this religion or that language? It has happened by random, and we accept it because in any case, you need a cradle. It doesn't matter whether the cradle is that of a Syrian Christian in Kerala or whether that cradle of culture is from an Assamese. It doesn't matter.
Thank you very much, sir. Our next question is from Rasika. She asks, sir, it is said that almost every tradition of ours has some or the other scientific reasons. But when we question things, we are only told not to ask so and do what is told. Hence, we don't. Hence we don't reach our roots. What should be done in such situations?
I gave you an example of how Makar Sankranti, Lori, and Pongal and others are all basically anchored, all basically firmly rooted in the crop cycle of sesame seed, most of them, not all, both in the crop cycle of sesame seed and sesame crop and the sugarcane crop. And why sugar and oil were absolutely essential, without which no kitchen in India could ever run, and how they were dependent on the crops, and how the arrival of the bountiful crop was indeed a reason for celebration. So even if there was no celebration mandated at that time, people would come out on their own and celebrate. So the naturalness, the urge to celebrate on the arrival of auspicious events is only natural. And that is how these have come together. Today, it doesn't matter. You can go and buy your bottle of Safola or some oil from the shop, and you can get your sugar from any source whatsoever. You can even ask for brown sugar of the right variety, I mean, brown sugar or white sugar and this and that. But their roots lie there. And because that pot yielded that flower, and that flower is identified with something that was passed on to me as an inheritance, I shall treasure that thought with me because I want to remain sane. I want to have my own identity.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is from Shreya. She asks, sir, like you mentioned, tolerance is very important to exist between for communities to peacefully coexist. Do you think the intolerance which arises in different cultures leads so due to ignorance?
Largely, ignorance, short-sightedness, exaggeration, feeling of deprivation, feeling of fear, myopia, all of them combine. But it's a question of the strength of your character to rise above it. You see, your community may be saying that this is horrible, you shouldn't do this, and God will punish you, or this will happen to you. But it's up to you, I have to adjust with this world, and therefore I do it. And that does not make me a treacherous person where my culture or community is concerned. It makes me a little more adaptable person. And instantly, cultures go on adapting all the time. Despite all the talks of nationalism and everything foreign being bad, look at us, from the shirt to the matchbox to the lamp to the torch to the cycle. They are all, a cycle is very much Indian, isn't it? A torch, if you go to village India, torch is absolutely essential even now. So where did the word torch and these instruments come from? They were all foreign products and they've been completely internalized, completely indigenized. And if you now go to Bihar and say that a lantern or a torch or this thing cycle is a foreign product, they'll say you're nutty, you're cracked. ये हमारे हिंदुस्तानी है, क्या बात करें?
Thank you, sir. Our next question is from Rasika. She asks, sir, we had a different kind of education today than what we had in ancient times, which was cut off from us by the British. Is there a need to review our education system again in order to incorporate our traditions?
It is being done continuously. There have been tilts in our education policy depending on the priorities that were considered necessary at that point of time. When India was coming together, it was necessary to emphasize the Indianness, the national character of India, instead of emphasizing on the regional variations. You know, when I was being brought up, in Bengal, it was so simple. The rest of India consisted of, all of South was Madrasi. Anyone who wore a turban was Punjabi. Anyone who wore a turban. And anyone who spoke in Hindi is still known in Bengal as Hindustani. So it was very easy. People outside Bengal consisted of ABC. The same happened in many other cultures where somebody would be branded as this and branded as that. If a Tamil friend came to my house, my mother would say, and a Telugu boy came, and my mother would say, Dono Madrasi. And my mother was also educated. But it was a term. Now, the way we keep brand ourselves, and this is all gone. The education through which we went smothered all these original differences to formulate a more unified concept of India. Now, education is constantly reviewed, and it's unfortunate, it is also subject to the political pressures of the ruling group of that period. It is the natural formulation because the ruling group has arrived because there has been a consensus at some point of time to have it in power. Okay. So it's not absolutely unnatural that that group would want to impose its view of history, its view of knowledge, its view on the people. But there is an inbuilt resistance to too much change also. So there's a complete process of reviewing that is going on. That is complete process of reviewing that is going on where education is concerned. And between the conflicts and pressures, we come to something known as an Indian average. Let me assure you that despite concerns to the contrary, there has been a lot of emphasis on the greatness of India. The entire national movement has been based on the glory of India. So there has not been any, despite what the British may have tried, where the Indian education system has been concerned for more than a century, it has glorified Sanchi, it has glorified the ancient culture of India, the ancient discoveries. It has in its own way. Unless you have studied in a completely international school where you've not been taught these things, I mean, this is very rare. In most schools, in almost all the schools, the glory of India has been taught. There has been no downsizing of that glory.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is from Shri Vidya. Shri, she asks, on the note of Indian and foreign products, is a movement similar to the Swadeshi movement feasible in this era? What are your thoughts on the Made in India way?
I only hope it succeeds because we really need to make in India. The previous versions of this Made in India, which I had also the occasion to look after in the Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Industry. In fact, I spent about half my working career in industry, finance, and commerce. Did not succeed because of various reasons. For instance, we never were successful in hardware. Computer software engineering, we did well. The hardware, all our products are imported. Look at the mobile. A small couple of companies do produce, but they can't compete on the economy of scale. And subsidy is not the answer. It has to think big, go in for big investments and big dreams. And now that we have a government that is really talking about Make in India and saying we'll support Make in India, maybe these ventures will succeed better than what I saw.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is, so you mentioned that we have adopted certain practices from other religions and cultures in our country. Could you please elaborate on those?
You can look at, for instance, we use the candle all the time, okay? The candle now is made from petroleum products, But in the past, candles were necessarily made from animal fat. And candles were absolutely abhorrent to the Indic religions because of the presence of animal fat and other things. The candle is now well accepted. So you can look at things like mehendi that the ladies put on during all sorts of festivals and all sorts of, including social festivals. That is common to all of us. You can mention in Calcutta, there are huge lines, maddening queues during Christmas to buy Christmas cakes, which is very Christian thing, from a Jewish shop known as Nahum, where the makers and the sellers are all Muslims and all the buyers are Hindus. So it's a ritual of the Calcutta Christmas. Have you got Nahum's cake? No, this time the line was too much, so I couldn't get it. Nahum is a Jew who's selling, let us say, Christian cakes through his very skilled Muslim artisans to a general Hindu audience. That is India. At every stage, you have these interconnections. It's a question of looking at it that way. It is best not to look at it and brand A, B, and C. I did it because this is public knowledge. This is public knowledge. So in everyday affair, we get a lot of festivities. For instance, you'd be surprised to know, I can mention from my state, you'd be surprised to know the number of that no puja pandal would be complete without Muslims and other religions joining in to construct them, number one. There are several of these where the worship has been protected by Muslims. They would not believe in these gods, but they would see to it that these worships continued in pockets where they were in a majority. So these sorts of things happen, and the reverse also keeps happening. Since culture is basically regional, we cannot generalize. But where Bengal is concerned, a lot of customs have been transferred from Islam to Hinduism and from Hinduism to Islam. Okay, I'll give an example. The batasha. The batasha is that roundish gold candy that comes out. Now, till date, we have not been able to find out who brought in batasha. Did the Muslims bring in batasha and celebrate it by scattering it during religious festivals, religious occasions? Or did the Hindus bring in and tell the Muslims how to celebrate these small token sweets after a religious congregation is over? So we can look at many of these festivals, small things. The batasha is a good example. The Misri is a good example. You know, Misr, the word Misr stands for Egypt. And the word Misri at least, not the product, the word Misri is of Arab origin. But a piece of Misri was an essential item of a sweet offering in many a religious place, not only a dargah, but in many Hindu places also. A piece of Misri is offered, a piece of sweet. Now, these have all complex origins, and one adopted the food of the other, and one adopted the piety of the other. All over Bengal, we have festivals, folk festivals, where horses and elephants, terracotta horses and elephants, are offered to the deities. It's common. It's common. I mean, you can't make out from that whether that's a Hindu spot or a Muslim spot. It's only when you ask the locals, they will say it is Peer. Peer means the Muslim leader. It's Peer's worship. And if you ask the locals, then they'll tell you that one is our Devta's worship. You can't.
Thank you, sir. I think we'll take two more questions. The next question is by Ms. Sonali. She asks, seemingly progressive areas continue to have regressive practices. For example, the Mafatlal swimming pool on Marine Drive still has a board hanging that reads, only Hindus are permitted. How do we as youth gently object to this behavior without causing strain and actually bringing a change?
Look, if sometimes an area is reserved for a particular community, let it be. India is so vast, so wide. I mean, unless it is offensive, unless the term is used offensively, if somebody has reserved an area for Christians, why not? We have so many areas. Let them be together in their own area. That itself is not communal. Communalism is an urge that comes from within, usually by propagation or by incitement to commit an act that is heinous and harmful to another community for being a member of that community. That is communalism. Communalism is not just having a signboard saying this is Christians only, this is Muslims only, this is Sikhs only. If they feel comfortable in their own company, let them be. Let them be.
Thank you, sir. The final question is by Vignesh. He asks, sir, according to you, what steps can we take as citizens to promote unity and integrity across the country?
You see, unity is a matter of mission. It's a mission. Our unity cannot be disturbed, cannot be allowed to be disturbed by any force. Of course, it is easy nowadays to brand X and Y as seditious and this and that, and it's going on. It's a new game that is quite harmful to the existence of India. Somebody sends a WhatsApp message and it's immediately sedition. By sedition is the overthrow of the government, meant in a very determined manner. If a government is toppled because somebody gives a WhatsApp message, I think that government needs to be examining its own stand very clearly. So nowadays, these things come up. We are going through troubled times. We are going through troubled times because the reassertions of identities, the retreat of identities are taking place. In these troubled times, we need to remember that we are Indians first, and then we belong to regions or religions. That there's an essential unity of mankind. The fact that I belong to a particular religion doesn't mean that I'm completely different from the other human. Remember all the time, the other human was never given a choice to belong to your religion. Conversion is a very, very difficult process and is not a favored item. So once you're born, you're ascribed an identity. And then you spend the rest of your life either learning about that identity or defending it, even if you don't know much about it. That's life. So an identity is also required to anchor you to the sanity of life. I firmly believe that even as an agnostic, even as somebody who keeps this distance away from rituals, that you need an identity to be anchoring yourself, to be tying yourself, to be more stable as a human, because you can always look back to the warmth of what you learned as a child. So unity is absolutely essential with the new generation. Where the new generation is concerned, unity and the national identity are given products. Remember, Mr. Ribeiro's generation, our generation had to go through a lot of problems. Punjab was segregating. Punjab was was on the warpath to come out of the Indian Union. At one point of time, Tamil Nadu had declared that we'll also think likewise. Assam, where I had to go, had these slogans, dogs get out. Assam was at one point. So we have had these problems of different groups trying to come out of the Indian Union, questioning the fact of the Indian Union. Now these are under rest. Now, we need to stop going overboard and declaring every dissident opinion as seditious or toppling the state structure of India. The state structure of India is built on solid foundations. You don't need a constable to hold it together. You don't need this thing. They are built on very strong foundations. As I said, a WhatsApp message or a group meeting or a protest meeting at a particular point of time by 20 youngsters doesn't topple the Indian state. So unity will be there, on its own. It's a given fact. Diversity is what we need to nurture, because as I said, diversity gives you identity, it gives you warmth, it gives you comfort.
Thank you very much, sir. With that, we come to an end to the question and answer session. Thank you very much, sir, for sharing your views with us. Now I'd like to request Ms. Shreya Yadav, Lead Campus Ambassador PCGT, to propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you, Ayush. As we near the end of the public lecture on unity and diversity, lessons from history and the way forward, I, on behalf of Team PCGT Conclave 2021, would like to thank Shri Jawhar Sircar, for our speaker for today, for taking out the time and delivering this insightful lecture. I would also like to thank Mr. VP Raja, Chairman, Public Concern for Governance Trust, for delivering the welcome address. I convey my gratitude to the trustees of PCGT for their persistent support and encouragement. I would also like to thank SVKM's Pravin Gandhi College of Law for their support in organizing this lecture. I would once again thank the honorable dignitaries and all the attendees for joining us today. I request all the attendees to fill out the feedback form in order to receive your certificates for attending this lecture. Tomorrow, for the day 2 of the PCGT Conclave, we have the dialogue on Constitution of India, a symbol of unity in diversity by Mr. Aspi Chinoy, Senior Counsel, Bombay High Court. Later in the day, we'll also be having the semi-finals and final rounds of the Oxford debate, and we encourage all the participants today to attend the same tomorrow. Once again, thank you all for attending this public lecture.
Thank you.
Dad, are we having the same thing tomorrow?